later tonight after the program. So, the blueprints of Filipino dream. So the flow, just to manage your expectations. So especially for the Q&A, I hope you guys will engage our speaker. Who is our speaker? So Julian is the Filipino Managing Director and of BCG Manila. Since joining in 2010, he has primarily led the digital transformation initiatives of the firm and has led the Center for Consumer Insights since then. So in his role, he's perfectly poised to talk about the Filipino dream. And without further ado, I'd like to bring to the stage our speaker, Julian Cua. Let's all give him a warm round of applause. Hi, Julian. Okay, Julian, the last time I saw you was in Zoom in 2020, so welcome back.
Good to be here in person, finally. Thank you so much for being here. I feel very, and I feel like I fit in with my blazer and my formal stuff and everything. But first of all, again, thank you for the time. So I wanted to walk you through, should I use a clicker na lang? Awesome. Okay, perfect. So I wanted to talk about one topic today. It's a topic that we feel very passionate about in BCG, because for us, when you think about consumer insights and what people think, it's one thing to ask them what they're feeling right now, but what we wanted to answer was more like what motivates them over the long term. So it's not just like the 1 year kind of like behavior, but like really thinking about what fuels their motivation over the next few years. So for us, it was really centered around the Filipino dream. Ano yung pangarap ng mga tao? And so the idea was to answer one single question, which is, what do the 115 million Filipinos dream of? And by the way, so I'll go through our presentation, walk you through. Later on, I'll also kind of like share through a video where we interviewed real Filipinos talking about their own businesses and what motivates them. I'll also invite one of my colleagues, James, who many of you probably know, who will talk through a little bit about some of the insights as well. So when we did the survey, we wanted to make sure that it's not just like 10 people sharing to us like what they think. We wanted to make sure it's representative. We adjusted for a variety of different things, social demographic things like geography, gender, income brackets, to really try to kind of like match what we have in the Philippines. So we talked to around 1,500 Filipinos all around the world, all around the country, from Luzon to Mindanao. And so one of the things we asked them, and I'm gonna make it a little bit interactive. I'll try anyway, kasi medyo malaki yung crowd. Pero I'm going to, we asked them one question, which is, what is your dream? What really motivates you? And so we gave them a list of choices, these 15 things that you see on the slide. And most importantly, we asked them to rank. It's not just one. We asked them to rank them in order of descending priority. Which one is the top dream, second dream, third dream, fourth dream, and so on and so forth. So I'll ask this group, and maybe I'll just ask our volunteers to kind of like guess. Pero what do you think is the most popular dream to as many Filipinos right now? Dream home? We have one for dream home. Start a business. Financial security for health scares. So that's number one. We were surprised, actually. And the reason is because when we actually asked the same question when we asked the question unprompted to the same audience, to the same survey respondents, actually like the home was I think Carl, you're the one who mentioned it. So for me, my guess was also home, moving into my dream home. And when you ask it unprompted, it was number one. It kind of like came up to the top. You make a word cloud and you see home, home, home kind of like coming up. But if you actually put it on a list, what you realize, and the survey was launched just last year, like Q4 of last year, is that a lot of people are actually scared for their health. And a big part of that, we think, was because of the pandemic. And this was already a few years after lockdown ended. And so what it means in a way is a few things. One is that the health infrastructure that we have in the country is not sufficient. Like people realize that if you get sick, You can have all the different dreams in the world. You want to kind of like buy your dream car, dream home, send your kids to education. Pero kung may nagkasakit, if someone gets sick, then you have to kind of like put your life on pause and kind of like spend all of your savings on making sure that they're healthy. These are the next three and arrange in this way. So a lot of like what we discussed actually came up: starting a business, moving into dream home. I will put a caveat: 58 and 56%, not that far off. Statistically similar. So I like to be dramatic by saying it's health scares, but the reality is it's tied. It's health scares and starting a business, followed by just having a good buffer of money and having a large savings fund, and finally, of course, moving into dream home. Sorry. One thing I'll add as well is I phrased my question a while ago, which is um, top dream to as many Filipinos. The reason why it's phrased that way is because every single one of these 15 items over here is a top dream for some Filipinos. And so if you think about the top three, pick any single box there. And if you're doing a business to target any one of those, you're probably going to hit a target where you're trying to reach a few million Filipinos. It's a big market. What we found was that Filipinos are generally optimistic, not that much of a surprise. I think it was interesting to kind of like see that it was happening both in the urban area and the rural area. It was a good sign. We have another survey that I'll kind of like reference, but it's not on the slides. That's specifically on MSMEs. 3,000 respondents conducted October of last year. Similar as well. So for small businesses, probably not these businesses over here, but more of like the mga sari-sari stores, small manufacturing sites. They're also optimistic. They actually want to grow. So I think what we're seeing is that when you speak to speak to your consumers, when you speak to your businesses, when you speak to the market, people want to grow. They want to invest for the future. I'll go through a few deep dives. So, well, we did a specific, parang industry specific kind of like deep dives around financials, around health, around retail, and a few other things. We'll do a video. I'll hand it off to James. We'll talk through a few slides, and I'll kind of like do a final kind of like conclusion at the end and open it up for questions. First deep dive that we'll do is around health. So I think this quote really encapsulates what the sentiment is. And it's really about if there's an emergency, the fear of if there's an emergency, you need to make sure that you're covered. People do think that overall their health has improved, and they think that it's going to improve over the next few years. It's becoming more of a priority. And then when we ask them what kind of things do they spend on, you see that they're actually spending on not just on like medicine, but they're starting to spend on things like supplements, preventative health checks, as well as kind of like fitness related kind of like items. I think what's interesting as well is that when you ask people who have HMO and don't have private HMO, what we found was that there was a slight increase in usage of supplements or purchase of supplements for people who don't have HMO because of that interest that they want to maintain health. They want to create a buffer by just buying some things like mangosteen pills and all of those things. It's okay. Great. So what you'll see is x-axis historic what have really increased year in year already. What you'll find is that everything here, actually zero is here, is that everyone has increased their usage for increased their usage of physical fitness activities, supplements, medicine, annual checkups between 2024 and 2023. So generally, overall health spend has been increasing. Preventative care is also on the rise. I think what we also saw, and I don't think we have it in this particular document, is when you ask people if they're how many of them have some cover in terms of like health insurance, and everyone here has national health insurance will fill health. um, the reality is when you ask them, people don't know. There's like 20 or 30% of people who say, no, I don't have any buffer, I don't have anyone who can support me. And part of that is basically some perception issue, some trust in institutions as well, but generally it's just that lack of feeling of security that they're covered. And that's why you're also starting to see a renewed kind of like interest in terms of like health insurance and HMOs. And we've seen that the people who have HMOs also tend to be happier, tend to feel more secure, tend to feel like they could go after all these other things that they want to do in their lives because they're safer. Starting a business, what we found is it's really about being financially independent. That is the underlying core. A big part of it, we think, is this trust in self, trust in private institutions, and trust in public institutions. What you'll find is that generally lower trust in the latter two, higher trust in self, higher trust in saying, if I can't achieve the income bracket that I want to have for me and my family, I'm just gonna do it myself. I'm gonna start up my own business. And in a way, you're starting to see that in terms of like overall happiness as well. Like if you think about the overall optimism among business owners versus employees and self-employed, and I'm hoping that the business owners here also feel the same sense of optimism. But generally, business owners tend to feel more in control of their lives and more optimistic about their future. Retail, here, we all know, of course, inflation has been a big hit over the past couple of years. We saw that overall people traded down in terms of like overall spend across most categories. What that means is that if you're kind of like going into businesses that creates value, private label products, for example, or just kind of like alternative solutions or services that provide better value for consumers, it's going to catch attention. And you'll find that you will get people who are going to shift some of their spend from the brands that they usually go after into what you might be offering. Pet supplies is also particularly interesting, where there is an increase in overall or a desire to kind of like increase the spend. Pets is interesting because we think that there's something around during the pandemic, people were kind of like buying, kind of like getting their first dog, their first kind of like cat, and they were gifting it to their friends and family as well and everything. And so there was kind of like an initial kind of like rise in terms of overall a market for those pet foods and pet treats and everything. That I think is basically what's fueling the future intent to spend, because everyone who are kind of like new, kind of like pet mommies or pet daddies, you have no choice. This is an overall view in terms of like brackets, in terms of like overall intent to pay more for high quality, satisfaction with the current price point, or paying less for the same quality. What's interesting here is that it's the middle class who have the highest interest to actually spend more. Not super surprising. But the reality, I think, is that when you look at the very affluent, they're pretty happy with what they have right now. And for the ones who are in the lower part of that income bracket, value is still really the most important thing. So it's really the middle who are kind of like thinking, well, I can kind of afford it now, but maybe I should try actually buying products that are a little bit more higher quality and try those out. Offline, as you know, has come back. I think that during the pandemic, we're all thinking, okay, is everything going to be online? Is everything going to be pure e-commerce? And to a certain extent, some of it has stuck, right? But the reality as well is that a lot of times, like the people who are still going into the malls before are still going to the malls again, and we kind of like really saw that during holiday season last year when you saw the malls packed during Christmas holidays. Finance, overall, interesting to see that there is a net increase overall in terms of like the different kind of like banking products. I think investments is quite interesting. People have an interest to actually save and put their money into basically invest their time into growing their own wealth. Um, One caveat with investments is that the word investment is open to interpretation. We weren't too specific in the survey because we didn't want it to be too product specific. But investments could come to some people, could be perceived as things like crypto, could be perceived as like property. But essentially, people want to kind of like save more money and grow their wealth rather than borrow their money. What's interesting as well in terms of like plan change, which ones are people wanting to, if in the future, do they want to kind of like have more of them or have less of them? You see, lending overall, generally, people are a little bit afraid, or consumers are a little bit afraid of taking out loans. It's not to say that they won't, but they have some desire not to load up their credit. Also interesting that credit card is actually higher than personal loans. Even though it's a form of credit, it's a little bit of a different kind of like product from perception of the consumer. And so for them, there's a little bit around that it's more done at the point of sale, more around the points, more as a payment method that kind of like distances itself away from just normal cash loans. I think not a surprise as well is that when you look at like urban and rural, for rural customers, a big source of like loans is still more of like the informal source of loans, such as employer, community institutions like their basically their community or the union or whatever. And in terms of like how do people choose the bank that they want to kind of like put their money in? A big part of it is still reputation, accessibility, ease. So it's still about trust and a bit about convenience. I think it's interesting to see how some of the ranking between urban and rural. So urban is orange, rural is yellow. How that sometimes flips depending on the dimension. So, for example, in most of the first three, urban really kind of like prioritize these first three that I mentioned. But for, let's say, this one around my family uses this bank, which is basically for rural is actually higher, which signals that for them, it's less about the ease of opening an account, but it's more like I trust this because my mother, my father, my brother, my sister all have used this before, and therefore I would trust it as well. And finally, last, before we go to the video, is attitudes towards AI. So overall, not a surprise. AI is big. AI is really being used for a lot of different things, research, school, and others. I think this one is interesting, which is Gen AI being used to research products of brands. You're starting to see that already where, historically, advertising business has really been focused around search, around social media as well, and kind of like putting new brands in front of you. But when more and more people are actually going to their favorite LLM to ask them which brand should they trust, which product should they buy, which channel should they buy this product from, then the question for brands is how do you make sure that you're kind of like on top of that list? So what is that evolution of SEO and SEM that is for AI? And since we published this 6 months ago, there's already starting to see some of the advancements right now in technology. The new buzzword right now is agentic AI, but it's actually real, right? Like I was in Singapore for NRF, the retail forum in Singapore a few weeks back, and everyone was talking about how Google has this new feature where you can talk to a bot and make the purchase there. So you can talk to it and say, "Hey, check me, get me can you look for this Nike? I'm sorry, for this Nike shoe, It'll give you the price, it'll give you the size, it'll ask you if you're okay to buy it at this price and ship it to your address, and you can confirm on the chat experience. Now, they also have this other technology, which is interesting. It wasn't combined yet, but this new technology, if you've seen the new Pixel and Google I/O, they were showing how they could get a photo of you, and then they could put any article of clothing on Google Shopping tab interpose it to you. So you could see how you look in any of the clothes that are already listed on the site. Now imagine both of those technologies together. Now you don't even need to use Google. You could basically talk and chat. You can get someone, you get the bot to prompt you and say, "Hey, we think this pair of Nike shoes looks good on you. It's on sale for 10%. We could have it delivered to your door tomorrow. Do you want to buy it?" Click yes, it's on the way. So there's something interesting that's happening on AI in terms of like how brands are surfacing themselves and the entire e-commerce experience. There's also things, of course, everything else that AI is disrupting right now, especially around how good deep research is becoming with nowadays. Overall, positive sentiment for AI among Filipinos, generally seen as a way that really increases work efficiency, also as a way that helps them overall in their daily lives. So both professionally and personally, people see them as a good thing. Some concerns in some areas, so it's not like we can completely disregard, it's not 100%, but generally positive sentiments. So this is the summary of dreams. It's a bit of a complicated slide, but the way to see it is prominence is how many people said that's an important dream for me. Variance is the level of disagreement that one survey respondent might have versus the other. And what that means is that dreams with low variance are generally seen as very common dreams among many people. Ones with very high variance tend to be very different depending on the segments. So to no surprise, you'll see the top 4 dreams right here at the top left: starting a business, health, savings, dream home. Traveling more frequently, generally quite high. Low variance, meaning everyone wants to travel. Maybe they have different reasons for traveling, but people want to travel. And then you have some of these other dreams where it might be a little bit more specific to certain social demographic backgrounds. So, for example, if you don't have kids, then this won't really be a dream for you. If you're not ready to retire yet, then it's not going to be a dream for you. But what I want to kind of like land here is for you, for everyone here, it's about knowing which market you want to go after. Because every single one of these bubbles is at least 5 million people. So even though I mean, it's, I didn't say these are not top dreams among top Filipinos, but it's still a top dream for many Filipinos. So who are the dreamers? I think this one is where we go to the video. And I have a dream that the tech would work this time. 50-50 usually. With sound. With sound. Sayang. So close.
Queen again. I want to be a host again. I want to be a politician and also a business owner. I think being a teacher now is the stepping stone to achieving all my other dreams. Being a teacher, I'm able to interact with so many people, interact with children, with adults, with co-teachers, with creative people, with people who are great with logistics. All these are skills that I can transfer when I have my own business, when I have my own world that I can operate on.
Ako po si Emerson at I work for Nobody Clothing. Ako po yung nag-handle ng website, orders. Minsan po, nagmo-model din. Simple lang naman po yung pangarap ko. Gusto ko lang ng masaya at saka komportable yung buhay. Magagawa ko na po yung mga gusto ko. Hindi na lang po ako nagtatrabaho para makakain. Kaya ko na pong bilhin yung mga gusto ko. Tapos, meron na rin po akong work-life balance. Siguro someday gusto ko pong makagawa ng fashion show.
Hi, I'm Sweden. I'm 35 years old. I'm a former newscaster turned mompreneur. My biggest dream is to have a flagship store. And the second one is to be able to build our dream home in Baguio City because we really love Baguio. And one day, when the time comes when we're old and gray, we want to retire in Baguio City.
Graduate ako ng BS Electronics and Communication Engineering. Technical Director ako dito sa trabaho ko ngayon. Gusto kong magnegosyo para makatulong sa pamilya ko, sa pamilya ng misis ko. Gusto ko maging farmer. Gusto ko rin maging social worker. Gusto ko rin maging high school teacher ng history. Sabi ko sa probinsya, pwede yun kasi kulang ang mga teacher doon.
I saw my lola growing up, having a beauty salon, having the time of her life, doing all those beauty services, and then we use it as a bonding. And she was like my best friend. Very close to my heart yung dream na yun. I want to have a life like hers, to have to spend time nang hindi siya chore, pero habang nasa business ka, tinitignan mo yung business mo, kasama mo yung family mo, nag-enjoy kayo together. I want to do a lot of things. But one thing that's certain is I want to be a mother and one that's present. So, my ultimate goal is makapag-grocery nang di nag-check kung magkano yung bilihan. But how to get there is having a business. More of the business owners talaga. Yung may financial freedom, yung kaya nilang makawakan yung oras nila. And that's who I want to be.
Dito ako nagtagal ng 13 years eh. Iba, ilang taon na ako nag-apply ng early retirement pag sinabing, wag muna. Sige, ganun lang. 58 na ako, diabetic. Haba ng oras ng trabaho ko rito, 2 a.m. to 11 p.m. May boarding house ako inuupahan, bihira ako mauwian. Buti na lang yung pamilya ko nasa malayo. Buti na lang may video call.
My lola got a stroke recently. So, lahat talaga ng resources that we get monthly from his pension goes to him. I'm working because I want to have a little bit more comfort for my own life. If I want to live comfortably, like buying my cravings, that comes out of my own expenses. So for me, parang dun muna tayo sa right now gratification because ang dami kong stresses. Parang bawiin ko muna to, maging masaya muna tayo for a while. And then tsaka na lang tayo mag-ipon or tsaka na lang tayo mag-focus on something na matagal-tagal pa naman.
Parang feeling ko po kasi ngayon kalaban ko yung sarili ko. Simula bata ako parang mataas ang expectations ng parents mo sa'yo na parang hindi mo afford na mag-fail sa isang bagay. Ayun po yung kailangan kong tanggapin na okay lang mag-fail. Doon ka matututo.
Nag-sacrifice yung mama ko na iwanan ako at nag-work siya as a domestic helper in Singapore. And then, yung papa ko, binibisita niya lang ako pag weekend, pag wala siyang pasada ng tricycle. They have achieved so much in life, in their own capabilities. I have no excuse to lax. I have no excuse not to work hard.
Anak ko lang yung inaasahan ko talaga. Kasi pag nag-uusap kami, lagi niya sinasabi, kung daddy yan ang dahilan para umuwi ka rito, gawin natin yan.
I have a tattoo actually on my wrist. I don't know if you see it. It says fly higher. And she always reminded me to fly higher. And by fulfilling that dream, fulfilling that goal, I would know that I was able to fly higher.
What pushes me to really do it is ensuring a bright future for my family. My husband also worked. Kumbaga, I want to be his partner in making that happen. To make sure that we provide a good life for our daughter, to make sure that she will have a good future ahead. If there's one word to describe my journey, that would be bahaghari. It symbolizes our experiences and our journey. May mga darker days talaga, tapos may mga happy days din. Pero, pag tinignan mo siya as a bigger picture, it's a nice image.
Siguro po struggle. Kasi parang lagi kong ini-struggle yung mga contradiction ko sa sarili ko, contradiction ko sa family.
Malubak. Wala naman akong naging trabaho na smooth sailing eh. Pero nakakondisyon ako doon sa prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
I think the word that I would use is long. It's been a long journey. And it will be longer. 35 years old is far from now, but it's going to be exciting. I feel like because I have so much dreams, I also have so much to achieve. And just a little to lose. Ano ba yung makadisappoint ka? Hindi naman siya malaking kawalan if it's for a bigger purpose.
So we'll go into. So what we'll do, and I'll pass it over to James, is basically what you're seeing is a set of psychographic kind of like segments. So basically based on the different dreams, there was a statistical approach to kind of like segment them into different profiles, 4 of which you see here. We've labeled them based on kind of like their behaviors a little bit, and we'll go through kind of like each one. So James, over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Julian. So for those that I haven't met yet, my name is James. I am with the BCG Manila office, and I'm from Cebu. I'm Filipino, and it is nice to meet you. I just felt like I had to get that out of the way. So, thank you. So our analysis indeed revealed 4 clusters based on the dreams that people ranked as their most important. So what I think is important with this slide is that there are the big consensus dreams that bind us, but there are also the unique dreams that certain segments and certain clusters of people have that others don't necessarily. So you'll notice that the majority are under providers. They want better lives for their families and will put their own needs second, which I think was very clear from Sweden in the video, who kept coming back to this idea of providing for her family, a brighter future for her children. Next, you have the trailblazers and the guardians that are, somewhat equal in terms of the number of respondents that fall into those clusters. Trailblazers, they're a bit younger. Their motivations are a bit different. I think the one time we came back to Emerson talking about his family is the sense of giving back to the people that have raised him. Guardians, on the other hand, I think it's very clear that we're in a different sort of stage of life at this point, where we're talking about maybe legacy or about the family that you're going to be leaving behind. This is paying for your children's education, etc. And then the last is rebuilders. And rebuilders, I think, is an interesting topic, especially as, as this was being written, we were coming out of a pandemic where people did experience hardship. And I say that rebuilders do. They want to bounce back from the hardship, especially the financial hardships that they've been beset with. But an interesting thing that we'll get to is that that doesn't stop them from wanting to spoil themselves every once in a while. So let's do a deep dive into providers. So as I said, providers want to provide adequately for their families, especially their children. They've established their lives. She was not starting out in her career. She was an entrepreneur trying to deepen in that particular field. But these people are generally married. They're lucky enough to own their own homes. They live in urban environments, so places where the population density is typically above 500 people per square kilometer. And they're employed. They're very practical with their spending. And this group of people, and maybe this is a positive statistic to think about, it's the largest cluster, and it's also the most net optimistic compared to the other clusters. They want to pay for education. They also want to pay off debts, move into a dream home, have large savings, all the sorts of things that center around the home is the fortress around which defends my family. They're less concerned with getting a dream job. They're less concerned with moving to a big city, owning a dream vehicle, buying luxury items, and then not in the headspace to retire yet. We're still talking about people that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she was 35. So in the past, they've experienced deprivation. They know how hard it is not to have savings, but today their situation has significantly improved. These are people that could be starting businesses, just as we saw in the video, but their focus is on financial discipline, saving or cutting expenses. Trailblazers, on the other hand, I think that, I'm sort of peering around the room and I feel like some people might resonate strongly with this group. I will also hasten to add that people don't necessarily fit into one group. You might feel inclinations to agree with how some clusters are, bits and pieces, and other bits from other clusters. That's expected. So they're interested in upgrading their lifestyle. They're very technologically savvy. So these are the people that actually have a high penetration in terms of banking, in terms of online banking. But this group is not really interested in loans. I think if you actually get into reading the report, he says it's a super duper ultra mega last resort. So that's not what they're after. It's not the life stage that they're in. They're single, living with parents, typically students or young professionals, some of which are working, just like Emerson. They want to get their dream job. They want to improve their image, perhaps buy luxury items, dream vehicle, but they're less concerned, of course, with paying off their debts, upgrading appliances. Generally, they live at home after all. Retiring probably is not on the horizon. In the past, typically raised in middle-class families, have had some experience with luxury goods. They've maintained or even improved their financial status. But one thing that's quite interesting about this is that comparing last year, they're not as optimistic that they're healthier this year. And so they are increasing their spend on health and health-related products. And if I'm not mistaken, the largest was supplements. So To achieve their dreams, they're seeking better job opportunities, and they have a very strong belief that a lever that's going to get them closer to their dreams is education. It's a lot of stuff that comes from themselves, their education, their personal backgrounds. They're not as dependent on public institutions to make their dreams come true. Guardians. They want to retire, they want to travel, they want to enjoy these years of their lives. Typically, they're at least thinking of retiring. In the case in the video, I believe Joey at some point wanted to retire, but was asked by his company to stay on for a while. They're mostly content with what they have, and in fact, don't necessarily reside in urban areas. This is the one cluster that typically resides in rural areas. That doesn't necessarily, I know he said he wants to be a farmer. That doesn't necessarily mean farm. It's just the population density, as I mentioned. Typically married with their own home, employed full-time. They're interested in retiring, perhaps moving to a bigger city, paying for the education of their young ones, upgrading appliances, and perhaps moving to another country. But what are they trading off here? This is actually one of the groups that is decreasing its expenses year on year, or at least trying to. But interestingly enough, it's also that group which is most willing to take on a loan versus all of the others to fund these things. So they're trading off having large savings. They're trading off moving into a dream home. So from their perspective, it is the working more and saving more that's going to help them achieve their dream. That's their big lever. I will also add that this group is very trusting that both public and private institutions are levers for them to achieve their dreams, meaning they believe in the insurance systems, they believe in HMO, they believe in these as levers to get to where they want to be. And then the last is rebuilders. This is the smallest of the clusters as measured by the number of people that participated in the survey and landed in this. So they are the least optimistic, as well as with health. They're comfortable where they are, but they still dream of upgrading their lifestyles. So it's interesting, but just as they want to have large savings, they want to start a business, they're also being fairly thrifty, they do want to buy luxury items for themselves. They've been through difficult times, and they every once in a while want to feel like I can do something good for myself. I can buy myself something nice. I think everybody can resonate with that sort of idea. So typically female, millennial, single living with parents, typically in urban areas, freelancers, people that are self-employed as well. What are they trading off? They're certainly not looking at retiring. They're certainly, I mean, sometimes situations motivate them not to be paying for education, not moving into a dream home or to another country. Interestingly enough, in terms of loans, this was the one group that said this is not a lever for me to achieve my dream. Every other cluster said some percentage of them, or the majority of them rather, said that it is a lever to achieve my dream. But this isn't the case for this specific cluster. So perhaps this is a reason why they've experienced being trapped in debt. It's another interesting statistic that although this has the lowest number of respondents as a percentage that have loans, in the last 12 months, the number of respondents that got a loan increased the most. So whether that's motivated by circumstance or to fund a business, it's just an interesting statistic. But today they feel like they're better off and more stable thanks to their own patience and perseverance. To achieve their dreams, they believe that engaging in side gigs on top of working hard and their current jobs is what's going to get them ahead. I think that for me, one of the most useful aspects of studies like this is there's a tendency to just average across and say that, you know, these are our big consensus dreams. But in a room like this, where founders are seeking to launch products in a market, there's a need to really deepen your understanding of who you're serving. So perhaps this functions as a lens for one to do such a thing. And to better carry that discussion forward, I'll pass back to Julian.
One example of that, right? Like if you look at this again, it's not to say that they don't do the same things, but why they do it might be different. So for example, rebuilders are pretty pissed off about how their life, how the pandemic has kind of like taken away some time from their life, from their youth. And so they're gonna, so they might be going to watch the same Taylor Swift concert as, let's say, the Providers or the Trailblazers, but they're doing it for a different reason. They're doing it for revenge travel, revenge spending. The trailblazers doing it because like actually my life has been good, and I want to treat myself. Providers might be going there because they want to give their children a different kind of experience. They want them to be more worldly, more international. So they might all be meeting in Singapore and watching the same concert, but the reason why they're going would be different. And I think for all of you, I think what's really important is to get under the skin a little bit and try to understand what exactly motivates each of your consumers or customers, because that's what's really important. Yes, you're building products. Yes, you're building services, but how do you convince them to use your product, your service? It's not just about the technical functionality or the technical features. It's also about having strong brand resonance with what they have and what they want in terms of aspirations. So a few takeaways. Number one, Filipinos still very much hopeful, still very much optimistic. Despite all of like the big events that have happened over the past few months, I feel pretty good about the country. I feel like we've been quite buffered from a macroeconomic kind of like perspective. It's pretty good. Second is health. We did not expect it to be as high as it was. We knew it was important, but we didn't expect it to be that important. So we urge everyone to think about maybe there's something there, whether it's about taking care of my own employees or finding a proposition that makes my product or my service more compelling to consumers. Third is there's an angle around B2C and B2B. When you think about micro and small businesses, a lot of times those are blurred. So sometimes they wear multiple hats. When we did some interviews with small business owners, some of them have multiple businesses. Some of them might be professionally employed, but they're doing several side gigs. Not because they like working 18 hours a day, but because they have to. So when you think about that, there's going to be some fragmentation in terms of mind space. So it's important to kind of like understand who your market is, who you're appealing to. Fourth, really around de-averaging how you see the country. Everyone has dreams. Whatever dream you're pursuing, whatever dream you're attacking, it's going to be sizable. Fifth, if I haven't stressed it enough, it's nuancing how you want to communicate and how you really connect with your customers. And finally, last and not least, is building on empathy. So this is a survey that we ran last year. It's the first of several surveys that we're planning to do. This year, in a few weeks, we're launching something called the MSME Hustle. So it's specific to small businesses. End of this year, we'll launch another one around the Filipino family and thinking about how different family members relate to each other and how that affects the purchasing criteria. But overall, what's really important for us, and I hope for all of us here, is to stay connected, to continue to understand how your market evolves. Because what we're doing here, even though it is kind of like a long-term horizon, and we ask consumers or respondents to project what's important for them for the next few years, things can change. And I think it's really important to maintain that pulse. So with that, thank you everyone for your attention. I guess we'll open it up to questions.
One. Thank you so much, Julian. And where's James? James. Hi, James. Oh my God, why didn't see you? Thank you, Julian. It's a very interesting topic. I could see everyone paying rapt attention because no one spoke. Thank you for that. We would like to open the floor for Q&A, but let me get started with his first question. So, Julian, this was actually a crowdsourced question. It was one. It was the clear winner from all the submitted questions by the audience. Having seen the five key takeaways, I wonder if what would be the systemic changes or policy shifts that would significantly help in translating the Filipino dream into reality at scale.
I'll try to answer. Parang ano, Miss Universe kind of like answer. But no. To be real, right? Like, I think it's important to kind of like break it down a little bit because there's so many different kind of like dreams that you want to unlock. And I always kind of like think about it in terms of like friction points. Like if you think about the ecosystem, what helps the ecosystem function more efficiently? And to get to that, you kind of have to understand a little bit and what are the bottlenecks. So for example, if you think about health, if you think about what's preventing more people from getting covered, What's keeping us from all having universal healthcare and accessible healthcare that we want when we need it? A big part of that, for example, is about risk. It's about profiling, because what really drives up medical costs is because there's a lack of clarity on individual. And one of the things that I think would really benefit the country overall, and this is not just health but also financing, is a really strong kind of like national ID. I mean, we have PhilSys, but it's not as ubiquitous yet. It's not as ubiquitous. It's not as accessible. It's not kind of like as integrated with some of our public digital public infrastructure, such as our credit bureau and all of those things. And as a country, as a kind of like a policy, or however you want to call it, um, the really big levers stand at the ecosystem level. And if that could be strengthened, imagine if every single business here, if you want to kind of like do KYC for your customers, you have to ping one server, right? That really levels the playing field. That allows you to lend more money. That allows you to kind of like provide cheaper insurance because you know the people are not fraudulent, for example. So that's one. I think businesses, when you think about starting a business, you think about that friction. Um, we did um, we did a survey a year and a half ago now, on the digital government services that you need. Things like, BIR registration, DTI registration, SEC, but also like local barangay, fire permit, and all of that stuff. And if any one of you have ever kind of like opened a business from that kind of like side and going through all of the documents, it's a very mixed bag. And sometimes it's really, really hard. And I think when we saw and we kind of like ran the surveys, that we saw that um, we expected some correlation between digitalization of those government services with experience, but actually there's none. Some government services, people were actually quite happy even if they were offline. And some government services were actually people were unhappy about even if they were online. And I think the reason is because the experience itself just wasn't good, even if it's not online. So just don't assume that just because it's online, it's magically better. If it was not designed correctly, or if it's not stable, it's not up all the time, it's not easy, right? So what would enable more businesses to thrive? A few of these kind of like frictions to get removed, make it easier for people to do things from the safety of their home rather than having to go through all of like the traffic and to line up for the queue. And hopefully maybe your local government has a way to kind of get a reservation, maybe not, don't know, right? But basically reducing friction for businesses to start up essentially. So maybe I'll pause there. I could go on across all the different dreams, and then we can have a big conversation. But maybe those two will kind of like spark some ideas.
Thank you. So mindful of time, we have room for 2 questions from the audience, so make it count. So let's have one question from this side and one down here. So who wants to ask question from this side? Okay, what's your name, sir?
Hello.
Wait, hang on, huh? Who from this side? Anyone? Selena, someone here in front. Oh, okay, so I'll get to you, sir, after we deal with this question. So yes, please
Hello,
introduce yourself.
good evening. So I'm Dr. Marco Paulo Perpetua. So very timing yung data insights. Especially, I was surprised that this is the first. So I thought that it was like business. So the Filipino dream pala is health protection. So in that context, I want to know, or can you share how can we replicate this on, like I am doing a telehealth startup, very specific on that report. So how can I replicate the quantitative or qualitative data for me to gather insights on my users? And what do they need in a health as a health provider and as a digital startup? So it might not be the correct answer from this consulting group, but I want to know is because in 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 a startup we need to progress in a data insight as well as like obsessive vision, something like that.
Do you have a big customer base already?
Hello.
Do you have a big consumer base already?
Right now I'm doing as a teleconsultation solo provider. So I do have like 5,000 to 6,000 patients all
Okay.
for 2 years straight. So I'm going for a platform now.
So when we did a survey, we tried to get insights. It was done. So we designed the survey. We designed the parameters. So we wanted to make sure it is representative of the Philippines nationwide across income brackets and everything. So that work you should design, right? Like who exactly do you want to talk to, and what do you want to know about them? The actual field work, that one we paid an agency to do. So it's a assisted kind of like interview type kind of like methodology where they get like a, I don't know, 70 to 100 kind of like questions. It takes a long time to answer. So someone needs to kind of like help them. So for you, you need to think about what exactly do you want to use it for? Like, are you looking to kind of like talk to existing customers or new customers? If you're going to talk to new customers, then it's going to be an external third party kind of like market research rather than you talking, sending a push notification to your members and trying to get them to answer an online survey. If you're going third party, it does cost money. So, but there are options, right? There's online survey kind of like panels where you pay like $5 a respondent, finite amount of questions. You can go as long as what we did. I think we paid around $25 to $30 per respondent. So it can get quite pricey. So my suggestion is to be very clear about what you want to get to know about them and who you want to go after, because that otherwise you get to inflate the cost and you might not get what you want.
It's a good answer. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sir, at the back, the downstairs.
Thanks. Hi, Julian. Thank you for the very incisive report. I think I'm going to jump off from, firstly, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Darwin Antipolo. I run an agency based out of Singapore. But what's interesting with this one, and I think I'm going to jump off from the original question, is that I noticed a while ago you mentioned that you're branching off with other sets of surveys. I think it's not more of a question, but more of an encouragement for you guys to continue on with this, because I think this will be very helpful for us here in the Philippines as a longitudinal survey rather than a snapshot. If I'm sensing that this is just a one-off, please don't do that. You will help us a lot by making sure that we see variances from this dream, and you will really help the community by doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's the plan.
Yes.
I don't think we're gonna do it every year, like the same survey every year, but every 2 years or 3 years or something. So there's a little bit of like creating more different kind of like going for more angles, and that's why we want to go for MSMEs. We want to go family. But expect maybe in 2027 or something, we might have a refresh of this survey, maybe with some additional questions, but repeating some of the questions that we have, so you could see how the dreams evolve, and see if some of the segments are changing as well and what their sentiments are. So one of the questions that we get asked all the time is whether we think it's just an effect of COVID. I personally don't think so, right? Because this was 2024, conducted 2024. It's already well past since the big surge and when people were kind of like talking about COVID every single week. So I think it is persistent, but I can't prove it to you until I get you a next kind of like survey a few years from now to show you that it's still pretty important.
Okay. Thank you. There. Okay. Thank you so much, Julian. So before I let you go, Julian, I just wanted to ask you for one thing, to give one final parting practical advice to the audience. But before I do that, let me do this one exercise so that you know the profile. So I mentioned that we reached 100 guests by 7. We reached 121 before we started the program. So just a show of hands so that our speaker is helped by the data. How many of you are working or has founded a tech startup? Please raise of hands. If you are not yet, you haven't built a tech startup but is an entrepreneur, please show your hands. Okay. Working for a corporate, non-profit, academe, Okay, very, very diverse.
Some people raise their hands multiple times as well.
Oo nga eh. So, multi-hatting. So, for the others that I might have missed, but thank you anyway for joining. So, it's a very diverse audience. Knowing that now, Julian, what would be your practical advice as a takeaway for our audience?
No pressure.
Yeah. Miss Universe question.
Um, okay, I think I think I think it's not always easy. The infrastructure is not easy to work with sometimes in the Philippines, whether you talk about the more immediate things like traffic, or some of like the bigger frustrations around lack of data about the country, for example, right? Like we don't have the same kind of like information that you could pull from about consumers like in the US. So my request is to show persistence and to continue going. I think I always characterize the Philippines as kind of like stable, solid, persistent kind of like growth. And if you look at, let's say, the GDP growth that we've had over the past couple of decades, it's consistently high single digits with through almost all of like the different kind of like crises that we've encountered as a nation. And I think for us, like we have to personify that as well. Like it's not always easy. We don't always get the highs and lows as maybe you will find in like Silicon Valley, for example. But it's consistency that what is what we have as a country. And I think for us as Filipinos, whether you're starting a business or doing other things, it's about showing the consistency and persistency in what you really believe in, what you're passionate about. So yeah, Miss Universe answer as well.
Yes, and it deserves a Miss Universe applause from the audience. Thank you, Julian. Maraming salamat. You can now have time to enjoy beers and soda. Okay, before we go back to the eating. Okay, please, may I request everyone to join our survey. But that, I wanted to thank our previous Rate of Rich guests for sending in their survey. We actually picked the winner for last month's Rate of Rich survey. And we would like to say thank you to our winner, Mr. Ralph Mann. Hi, Ralph. Thank you for sharing your feedback to us. You will receive a GC from one of our investees, from our colleague here, head of Corpcom, Selena Durante. So she will give to you your prize. So there's more for this month. So please make sure that you scan this QR code and send in your feedback. Because like any startup, we do iterate the execution of Raid the Fridge based on your feedback. So we make sure that we are always responsive to how our guests feel about Raid the Fridge. So on that note, thank you for attending tonight's 143rd program. And we're not yet done with the evening. The program is done, so thank you. But we are open